Thanks a lot for having me on. My name is Karl Björnsson, located in Iceland, and I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called Hefring Marine. At Hefring Marine, we are developing a digital AI co-pilot systems for operators of boats and vessels, intended to improve safety and comfort and efficiency on boards, in particular when navigating through difficult sea conditions, with onboard decision support, real-time tracking, and automatically generated trip reports.
All right, so there are so many questions that are already going through my head, but I'm going to say, hello, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Doing very well. Thank you.
Excellent. You look good. You look good. You look good. You look healthy. You're smiling.
Thank you. Thanks, you too.
Well, before we one, I love that I love technology because you're in Iceland. I'm in Boston. Well, I'm in Marblehead off of Boston. And I love that the technology brings us together. But I wanted everyone to understand who you are, because we're going to dig a little deep into this like massive, intense conversation about what you're doing and how you're doing it and why you're doing it. But I want people to understand where you came from. So who are you, Karl?
So I guess I'd start from the beginning. I started in the corporate world, more on the business development side, so I don't come from technology background. I got adjusted to the corporate world, but well, I got used to it, but never really felt like I fit in too well. Things worked too slowly, and I wanted to, I saw issues that I wanted to deal with on my own, and I saw ways to do it that wasn't necessarily possible within a corporate structure where things had certain fixed processes and systems. So I set about after that to move into a startup scene. Started working with a startup company that was related to the marine industry. It was focused on building or developing a very particular type of boat hull, intended to mitigate impacts and shocks as boats move through the water. And I didn't have much of a background in the marine environment, but just really got quickly into it. And I guess that's one thing I can say about myself. I'm a fairly quick learner, in particular if the interest is there. And the interest was there in the innovative aspect of the solution they were developing. And I just got really into that scene and into that sector. So fast forward a little bit, we were doing research and studies on this hull, and like I said, I'm based here in Iceland, and Iceland had a dramatic boom in tourism over the last 10 years or so. And with that, there were a bunch of these whale watching and puffin watching tours and everything that popped up everywhere. And some of them were having issues. There was some accidents happening related to high-speed boating, etc. And in our research, we were seeing exactly why that was happening just in the data. And so we thought, well, here's something we can fix. Like this is information that an operator should know in real time and be able to do something about it. It seems very vital. And so that's what Hefring started as a bit of a spin-off project from research.
Whoa. Okay, so as much as I'm going to get excited about this, and I mean, anything ocean and space, I gravitate towards, but there's so much more to you, my friend. And I have to say that you started where I transitioned in the corporate world. Who are you first, though? Because everyone knows the brilliance and the curiosity and the innovation stems from somewhere and stems from something. So you can't start in the corporate world. You are more than that. Who are you? Like, where did you come from? And why would you ever go from corporate to this? Because it's just such a different way of thinking. And so I want people to understand who you are as a person and where you came from before we understand the corporate you.
Okay, all right. I guess I can relate it back though, because I am somebody who can change fairly quickly. So I find an interest in something, I get really into it, and make sure I get that project through to the end, and then my interest can shift to something completely different and go deep into that as well. And I guess that I wasn't finding me in that corporate setting because I wasn't able to do that. Where I come from, it's a good question. It's one that I haven't really thought of in a while. I usually think of myself in a setting from a business setting. I think
that's one of the things that I do a little bit different, where like me, when I'm talking to anyone, whenever I meet someone, I always ask, like, tell me who you are versus tell me what you do. because you're more than your job and you're more than your degree. So for me to understand your company, I'm always curious to know who you are, like your family. I mean, was there entrepreneurship? Like, I mean, even just the essence of you going from the business to the sea is just so different for me, where I can't fully grasp at why would someone ever do that. So to understand who you are first means so much, so that way I can like see like, oh, I could understand now why he has a love of X, Y, Z.
Okay. Well, you spoke of family. I'm a family person. That comes first, to be honest, before anything else. So first and foremost, any goal is set to make sure everybody at home is happy. And that has to be that way, because you have to have strong support at home in order to be able to do this thing in the first place. People have to understand why you're working ridiculously long weeks and be able to support you. So you then have to do the same. And Icelander first and foremost, and I guess there's something in our genes that stems from why our ancestors decided to set up on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic and survive through it, because it's not an easy place to live for the last 1,000 years. Now we're good. Now we got central heating and everything is nice, but for like 1,000 years, people just for some reason stubbornly stayed here. So stubbornness is very much in my genes, and stubbornness to see things through and to make sure that you don't give up on something just because it's difficult. You just have to power through it and be able to adapt. If things get hard, you just have to figure out a way to get over them. So that's, I think, I loosely explaining a bit of my character there.
Well, you did a very good job of that one, because I mean, because that is one of those moments where, with your brilliance, I mean, I met you, I mean, I can't remember how long ago I met you, but with your brilliance, you could have gone anywhere. I mean, why would you want to stay in Iceland when there's just so many different opportunities all over the world?
Well, Iceland's a really nice place to be. First, it's really nice and safe, and it's very well connected to everything else. So we're right in the middle of you guys over in the west, and then Europe over in the east. So it's easy to get around. Extremely modern country, and because I haven't suffered as badly as some places in the world have now in this recent crisis with the COVID, because we're small, and because we're small, we can be flexible. And we react quickly to things, and that's something I like. And I did live abroad for 12 years or so. Lived in Luxembourg, lived in the UK, lived in Hong Kong, and then shorter term here and there from Australia to the US. But I ended up back in Iceland, and I think Icelanders do that. They always tend to come back home. There's something here going back to the mention of the family, it is nice to be able to let my 8-year-old just go outside, and I don't have to think about where she is, and like there's no worry. It's just a safe environment, and being able to know that as a nation we're pretty flexible to things. So this crisis hits, we just all go all right, we got to do what we got to do. We just got to close everything down now. For if we do it quickly enough, we can just get back on track. And we did. So by early June, everything was open again, and we haven't really had any issues since. I
love it. I love that this conversation is like going it's in a different order than the other conversations I've had. So I'm just going to this route. When the pandemic hit, I mean, you just said it. I mean, like, you guys were able to shut down very quickly. You're small, you're nimble. What has it done in regards of your engagement with other countries? You're looking at all the different other countries. You're looking at your industry, which we're going to go into a deeper conversation about, but you're looking at all other countries. You're looking at Europe, and that was the epicenter at first. And then you're in the States, and in the States, we can't get out of our own way. But yet you're doing business with all these different locations. How has that affected your country?
It slowed things down, obviously. I mean, for us personally as a business, it had a big pivotal effect because we launched our first product this year in March, like 15 minutes to COVID, pretty much. And we were targeting tourism to begin with, because that's where we saw, there's a large number of passengers that go on these boats that don't have experience of being on the boats, and therefore they don't really know what to expect. So our system applied very well there. And then tourism was shut down, so we had to just think of something else very quickly. And we were able to do that. So we got ourselves through it. But once we were through sort of the worst of the pandemic and back up to full speed in June, or semi kind of full speed, we were still faced with the fact that a lot of other countries are still shut down. So we had to, and I guess that's something we can do because we're a startup and we're fairly nimble. I know the larger companies here don't necessarily have that option, but we could find the countries that are perhaps least affected and talk to them and target them. And in our case, we talked a lot to the Northern European countries, or like Netherlands, for example, handled this fairly well. So we now have a strong network in the Netherlands because we just focused our attention there. But I mean, there are things we had to keep in mind, just like from this sort of Zoom conversation setting, we realized that, we, in some meetings, we were bunched together over a computer and chatting. And over time, I started thinking that doesn't look necessarily too good because everybody's thinking of it from their own perspective, where everybody's staying in separate rooms with 2 meters between them. So yeah, there were things we had to keep in mind as a country. I mean, we were very reliant on the outside world. We're a small country. We rely heavily on import. And things were slowed down quite a lot. But you see Icelandic startups popping up, offering, there's just buy Icelandic produce, buy this and that comes from here while we get through this. So we've handled it.
I live in a very small town, and I am 18 miles from Boston, and it has been really beautiful. I live on the ocean. It's been really nice, and I literally went to Boston for the first time since February. Recently, I went to the post office, and I went at 5 o'clock in the morning, like in and out, and it was so surreal because your peripheral of just engaging with a bigger world is just so bizarre because this is what we've been doing, or the neighbors where we're in our bubbles, we only frequent with the same neighbors, etc. So I think that, you're in an amazing place to be. I mean, and mind you, last year I was supposed to be there, and then I had to like cancel my holiday there because I had a funeral to go to in my homeland. But it's one of those moments where just to see how the smaller countries in the smaller towns are handling things has been fantastic, not only for the community, but for the small local businesses that are doing very, very well, which is strong. Which now brings me to walk me through how your company was created and if I'm a consumer that I want to engage with you, walk me through what happens.
All right. So we were created, as I talked a little bit about it in the beginning of our chat, we were created as a spin-off from research. We were created to solve an issue that we knew was there because it was all over the papers. And we were also seeing it in other countries around us, which is simply initially at least, that was our focus, simply the effect of a vessel moving through the water and what those movements can do to you on board, or crew, or operators, or just the vessel structure and systems themselves, of repeatedly taking on impacts. And then started thinking from there, well, there's a lot of other things: the stability of the vessel, the efficiency or the lack thereof, of putting a lot of effort into moving vertically as opposed to just horizontally through the water. So we were set around to solve that issue. We've now moved it up from there, where it's more of a guidance system in itself. So we sit somewhere in between a fully manned platform, traditional manned platform, and autonomy. So we provide a link for manned vessels to move into autonomy, and are actually also now in the process of developing a system for autonomous vessels, because they are being operated largely by human operators on shore who are not on board and therefore have no sensation of how the boat is moving. In particular, because their visuals that they use are cameras on stabilizers, and they don't show you very much of what the movement is doing. So if somebody were to approach us, firstly defining the problem and the sort of application they're looking at, are they in a workboat environment, is it recreational, or in unmanned surface vessels even? Defining and scoping out that issue, what in particular is it that they see that our system could, where our system could add value to their operation. And that's a very personal conversation we have with them. I mean, we're still fairly small. We still maintain things very, very personally, and we like to run projects on a pilot basis, test first how do we best set up our systems to apply to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then scale up from there across a fleet or across a number of vessels. And we're open to any projects that fit within that category. If you're looking to improve safety, comfort, and efficiency in your vessel, or just the performance of your fleet overall, then we could have the solution for you.
So so I'm trying to wrap my head around a few things. Number one, I live by the ocean. I live by a very big fishing community that the Perfect Storm was based off of from Gloucester, Massachusetts.
Right.
We have these big, huge ships, the USS Constitution, and we have all these wooden ships that have been around for quite some time, years and years and years, and they survived. They survived. Why is your technology needed now? Because we've been in the water for centuries. And all of a sudden, why would I want to care? Why would I need you? Number one. And number two, is this more for a commercial or for personal? Because I live in a sailing community. So you have all these sailors, but it's like a passion for them to sail. You have the war between the motorboats versus the sailboats. Is it something that's needed for because you just said the personal part, is it needed for more the personal use or for the commercial use?
Well, we're more focused on the commercial use for now, at least. We aim to have more of a recreational solution going forward. But, as I said before, we're always interested in having that conversation. We're also more on the motorboat side, because the sailing boat in itself has more stability built into the structure than or simply the form of the hull itself than a motorboat does. So we're somewhat focused right now on motorboats applications within the commercial sector. And commercial we select because you have to be out there. If you're in a recreational boat and the weather's bad, you just stay home. But a commercial boat doesn't have that option necessarily. And why need it now? Well, firstly, it's because it's available now, because the technology is there now to do something about it. And yeah, people have survived, but there's research, for example, here in Iceland on because you mentioned fisheries, on fishermen who have spent years on these vessels, and after their tenure on these vessels, they may have to claim for disability just because their backs are out or their knees are out, because they've had to endure on these boats for long enough for their bodies not to keep up with it. And that as a work environment, that's a difficult thing to have to accept. So if anything we can do to improve that is worth trying. And that's what we're doing. We want to improve that work environment, whether you're out there because you're on a Coast Guard boat or you're out there because you're on a fishing vessel. And in the same way, you have automobiles nowadays with much more technology than just 10 years ago, all for the sake of safety and continuous improvement. And we're simply adding a similar element into boating as you would see in the automotive sector.
Well, I love that you just said that, because people, if you're thinking about a fisherman, honestly, we're not thinking about the wear and tear of the ocean. So if someone's thinking, yes, you're in Iceland, maybe going through the ice is what they're visualizing, but you're not thinking about those big, huge, you're hitting a wave. Those waves, water is just such a powerful element. If people had to think about when you're jumping off of a bridge or jumping off of a cliff, and if you don't go the pencil dive or the head dive, it's like Iceland. That water hurts like a cement. It's like it's cement. And so boats, people don't think of I'm going on a boat. I'm not thinking about a sailorman when I'm watching a fisherman coming off a boat, and they are walking like they're an athlete. Athletes that are running up and down a court or on the football field, they're not thinking about that because it's never a thought process unless it's brought to our attention. And so,
exactly.
What is in regards to the studies, how many fishermen or how many people that are in the commercial industry, how quickly is their career, and how quickly is the career ended because of the wear and tear on their bodies because of being on the boat?
Well, I mean, this study was looking at, and I stress that this study was an Icelandic study, so it might be slightly different depending on each country, but there they were looking at a 10-year span, and they had I can't remember the percentage right off the top of my head right now, but there was a significant portion of fishermen who were not able to continue to fill that 10-year horizon, or to work for that 10-year horizon. And many then following that who were then not able to move into similar jobs or any labor intensive jobs after 10 years, simply because their bodies couldn't do it anymore. And a lot of people that go into this line of work are I mean, they're younger people. So you start out young, and by the time you're done, when you're, you know, in your early 40s or late 30s or something, your body can't take it anymore, and that shouldn't be the case. And the studies that we often cite, for example, or studies or statistics that we often cite, for example, in the States, is done by the U.S. Coast Guard. And so what we're trying to do is, what we're doing with our system is giving you more predictive insight into a very dynamic environment. So the ocean is extremely dynamic and constantly moving. And there's been, typically people have, or the industry has said, you can't really predict the ocean. It just is what it is, and you have to react to it. And then you have to know that each and every operator is different, and each and every one has different levels of experience and different levels of actually being able to handle any random circumstances that happen. So can you bring more standardization and more predictability to that? And going back to the US Coast Guard studies, if you go through them, you see, or these annual reports that they give out, 90 to 96% of all accidents on boats, for example, are human related. I mean, they're down to human errors in decision making, because people are going too fast in conditions that didn't warrant that speed, not paying enough attention, which comes then down to situation awareness. So we're trying to tackle that, giving you more insight into the trip ahead, knowing what you've done in the past, what is likely to happen going forward, and how should you anticipate it, and how should you be aware of what is going to happen, so that not only you, but then everybody else on board is in a safer place.
Can this technology be used in other industries?
It could. I mean, it could. We have. Right now, we're focused on boating for now, because that's where we came from and that's where we saw the immediate problem. Yeah. We will be scaling up into, not yet, but it's a plan to move into larger vessels. Firstly, we have considered the application for weather-related prediction in automobiles, but that's still very much of an idea at the moment. So we're not there. That's not going to be focused anytime soon. But yeah, essentially, you know, predicting your environment based on seemingly random factors could be applied elsewhere.
Yeah. I the weather and also the ocean, very, very random. Absolutely, without a doubt. What have you and your team created or discovered during this pandemic? So you are rapid, you are going to launch something, now we're going to slow down, but it gives you time. It gives you this abundance of time of reevaluating a lot of things that you probably didn't have time to do before. So what did you guys either create or add or clean up or organize during this time?
It definitely gave us time to go back to the drawing board and fixing a lot of things. So when emails started slowing down a bit, you know, when you started feeling that people weren't at their desks anymore, especially in the beginning, and people got adjusted to working from home, etc., and people went back, things got back on track. But in the beginning, we just used the opportunity. All right, let's take the device we have now, and let's see how we can improve it. And I mean, we learned a lot from that, and that was definitely worthwhile, because we had been in our sort of R&D phase for a long time, and then we were set to go into our sales or more business development phase, and that was going to be that was going to be the vast majority of 2020 was going to go into that. Obviously, R&D still being there, but more of the focus of the company being in business development. But it forced us to go a little bit back into R&D, which is probably something you should do anyway. After the first initial sales, go back, see what you could improve. And it also gave us time to focus on those initial customers that we had instead of moving too quickly, and which was worthwhile because there was a lot of stuff we had to fix. So it was, and we had a pretty good pipeline built up before COVID within the tourism sector, which included a collaboration with a large insurance company, their customer base, etc. So it was a good pipeline, and it was initially upsetting that didn't go through. It might at some stage when tourism picks back up, so it's not lost. But potentially not a bad thing that it was put on pause for a little bit, because we made improvements that we probably wouldn't have done otherwise. In terms of development, and in terms of just overall being, handling uncertainty and having a little bit more patience, because at least I'm that way, and I'm assuming it's sort of shared among other startups, that you tend to be slightly less patient perhaps than your customers. You're always pushing a little bit. Let's get this thing moving. Going through this, you realize people are still going to come back to you. They just have other stuff to think about at the moment. You're just going to give people a little bit of time, come back to them when things settle a bit.
I think that's one of the things that I found, that more and more people were just checking in on their people, not asking for anything, not like, we don't want to sit there and rush and do business, because people were panicking. People had no idea what was going on. People, once they realized what was going on, they didn't know how to absorb it personally and professionally. So I think that was a really good thing, that a lot of companies, the smart companies, your companies, took the time to just check in on everybody, which was really good.
We have I have email conversations with people now that we're just chatting. We know that something's going to happen at some point, but just to keep the conversation going, just like, hey, how are things going at home?
Oh, I love it. No, I think that's fantastic. We're all in the same situation, so I think that's it's a smart move. It's human. It's human. It's humanist, where I'm very lucky where you guys are all over the world, and I get to check on you this way. But I could have just checked on you like via LinkedIn. There's always ways to just make sure that people are doing A-okay, because this is a global situation versus a local situation. And even if it was a local situation, our friends around the world check in. We check in on one another.
Exactly.
If you were to talk to, there's a lot of individuals out there that are working for corporate companies, working for, a small company, a medium-sized company, and they've been doing it, and now they're home. Everyone's home, and they're looking at interviews and conversations like this, and they're thinking, there's somewhere that I need to be, and it shouldn't be this job. Yeah, I'm getting paid, but there's so much more to me. What advice would you give to someone that, just like you, where you were in this corporate world, traveled around the world, you lived in other locations, and then you found this passion? What would you say to someone that's like hesitating or contemplating making a move?
It's a difficult move to make, to be honest, and it's not easy, and it's not always fun. It's often properly difficult, and you have to you go through a lot of very different emotions within the span of 1 week. You have very good news, and then, oh no, it's awful again, and you just have to, over time, you learn to sort of rationalize that and just find a middle ground where you hope for the best but don't necessarily expect the best. But moving into it, I'd say it was completely worthwhile from my end, at least. I don't think I missed anything from having moved from the corporate world. If you put enough work into it, you will find your way, and you will eventually, you'll eventually find a place where you're happy, but you also create a bit of a mindset where you're quicker to move out of it if you're not. So if you get stuck in one place for too long and you're overthinking whether to move away from it or not, taking a step to move away from it will then immediately make it easier to move away from whatever the next thing is that would otherwise stop you from moving. And then things become easier. Not necessarily easy, but it becomes easier to make quicker decisions of where you want to go in life. So if somebody's really thinking about it and has it at the back of their mind that much, then they've probably already made the decision. It's just a matter of taking a step.
Being in your world, what's the high and what's the low?
So beginning of the week, thought I'd lost a contract.
Okay.
Wasn't getting sort of the responses that I was anticipating and that I'd sort of planned my week out to be. So that was a bit of a downer. Then, but got 2 days later, got a large innovation grant accepted here in Iceland, which actually opened up a completely new project for us for the next year. So that's 1 week of, nothing worth celebrating to everything's worth celebrating now. So the ups and downs the main thing is just don't take them home.
Which of course now, of course, I am going to take it home. How is it where for your wife, you were traveling? I mean, were you married while you were traveling, or did you get married when you were back home?
No, so I'm not married yet, but we're long-term relationship.
Yep, long-term. I'm so sorry. I assumed. So sorry.
No, but when I was traveling, it was so it was in the middle when the things were happening.
Okay. And so how was, I mean, working on a startup, like you just said, there's a lot of you. It's day, it's night, you live it, you breathe it, you're eating it. You have the 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And now you're a dad, you are in a relationship, but you're living and breathing this, and everything is changing around you at any given time. And you're working in an industry that's changing every second, not even just every day, but every second. So how is it that you're juggling all of this, and how are you keeping the family in a relationship where it's a good relationship for you and for them?
I'd say, well, when I said before, don't take it home, I mean, take the good news home, and also take the bad news home and then just explain it. But this was a learning process as well. I mean, I didn't do this off just immediately. It took a while to understand how best to approach it, but keeping things at home, good. It means if there's bad news, I tend to take them home and get advice and then talk about them. And then, get everybody involved, because this is not just my issue. This is all of our issue, because they have to be around me all the time. And they have to be around my work all the time, a lot more than when it was just a 9-to-5 job. But if it's good news, come home and blast it out and then go have some sushi or something to celebrate. So, but if it's really bad news, there's no need to bring everybody down with you. And that's, you just have to find a balance there of keeping everybody motivated, but, getting advice at the same time. But when I was in the corporate role, I was also, my girlfriend was also telling me then that, there was clearly something on my shoulders that I needed to get out, and that was to change. So, she pushed me into this direction as well. So it's a little bit on her, but, but
you chose well, because she helped you make a really great decision.
Yeah, and she supports me through everything, and she understands. She knows what it's like, and she understands that it's got to be this way. She works a lot too, so it's but she knows what the deal is but she knows it's what I'd rather be doing than something else. And if I come home happier doing this, and they are involved, than doing something else where I wouldn't be happy, then rather go for this.
So I have a few more questions. So generation-wise, you said this at the beginning in regards of knowing how long the lineage is in Iceland. How long has your family been in? Born and raised by how many generations? What generation are you in Iceland?
I don't know. We were here 1,000 years ago or something. So I'm fully Icelandic. There may be some French sailor in there somewhere. There's a bunch of them that got sort of mixed in at some point that everybody is somewhat related to. I think it was because we were isolated for a long time, and then like a bunch of French fishing ship came up here, and everybody got excited about it. But generations since the Norwegians first landed here back in 870 something.
I think that's the coolest thing in the world. And by the way, if someone's looking at you, they would never think you're from Iceland because you have dark hair, and everyone's thinking about like Leif Erikson. So people are thinking hair, etc. So it's nice to see that not everyone looks what everyone assumes, which is one. So just thinking about where do you think the industry that you're working on right now, where do you think the industry is going to be in post-COVID? Because the fishing industry has changed. I mean, all industries, it's slowed down. And of course, you're having all the shipping industries. Let's just use example of in China, where ships were sitting in the ocean for quite some time. They weren't able to dock. So your technology is proper, but if we don't have the boats out there in the ocean, what's the point? And so what do you think will happen? When will it happen? And how will that benefit you, or how will you benefit the industry? That was like a very low question. I'm so sorry, but I think I'm dumping it all and I'm going to say nothing.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll answer it from the perspective of the sort of environment that we are focusing on right now. So more like the smaller vessels rather than the bigger ships. We made the conscious decision in COVID to go to talk to the group of people that still needed to go out. So like Coast Guard, search and rescue, regardless of whether the pandemic is still going on, they still have a role to play. And they still do. I mean, the Coast Guard's been out constantly through here in Iceland, especially constantly even throughout the pandemic, just with their own set of rules on the ships. But what the market or the industry that's probably been growing fastest within the space that we are looking at is the sector for unmanned vessels. And that is going to continue growing and at a faster rate. And there's good reason for it. I mean, you can avoid accidents from happening in the first place if there's nobody on board. And you can keep boats operating even though, the rest of us have to be stuck at home. So regardless of what that application might be, whether it's still a while to go until you have unmanned fishing vessels and they'll come back fully loaded. But that's why we want to introduce our technology, and we are introducing our technology into that sector, because until your automated systems know how to handle the ocean around them and know how to predict it and know how to have the insight that an experienced operator would, looking out at the ocean and then knowing how to behave, you're not going to have anybody else on board. People are not going to trust being in the boat that doesn't know if it's hitting a 2 meter or 4 meter wave. But you will have vessels patrolling environments, and they can be fully unmanned. So you can still have that operation ongoing, even though we're stuck at home. But I think moving to sort of the more perhaps manned sector, it is constantly evolving with technology from other industries. I mean, the boating space or the marine industry tends to take a little long sometimes in adopting new technology, but it gets there in the end. And there are a lot of different solutions coming up that somewhat bridge the gap between, or bringing digital technology into the boating sector, bridge the gap between what you might consider manned and unmanned, whether that be just more intelligent autopilot systems or replacing some of the operators or the captain's time with automated operations. And that's an ever-growing segment. And even with manufacturing of boats slowing down, etc., there's still been tenders going on. I mean, like public tenders going on during this time. It's a long process. So people anticipated that this wouldn't be, the norm for that long, that you couldn't roll out a tender process and have people bidding for it. because they usually take so long anyway that by the time the project is done, we should be over this. Yeah, that was a bit of a all over the place answer.
No, that was good because I mean, again, I dump out a big question, and so I love what I'm getting because you just reminded me of something that you've been mentioning, and I dropped the ball about asking this question. Was that whole entire concept of an automated boat? It's so our biggest, because we live, I mean, we're an ocean view, oceanside state. The biggest things were I'm drawing a blank on the name, the propellers, the wind turbines.
Yeah.
Being built in the ocean. That was like a big, huge controversy here. Senator Ted Kennedy was absolutely against it. And then once he died, I felt like they were being popped up every which way, which we worried more so because of the perfect storms, because the weather changes so dramatically here that any of our boats can crash right into it. Now you have bring in Amazon. Amazon is like considering the whole entire, you have the animated cars, you have the drones delivering your packages, but then the story just came out where an eagle took down one of the drones because it saw it, it went after it, an animal doesn't know, but now you have boats, an animal doesn't know, a whale, something could happen out in the ocean with these automated boats. Do you feel that it is, yes, is it safer for the individual, the humans? Yes, but it takes the jobs away from them as well. So can you just tell me a little bit more, what is the full benefit? Because yes, outside of the money part of it, that individual still needs a paying job. And the fishing industry it's good paying if you can bring in a good haul. So what other ways could this benefit the fishermen or anyone in the small boat industry versus taking the jobs away? Because if you're going after the automated vessels, doesn't this take away from a lot from the individuals that would probably use your product for growing their fleet, growing those jobs, etc.?
Well, I'll take the fishing industry aside because that's still quite far away. I haven't really thought that far into the future of how the fishing industry will look when everything is automated, even though it can eventually go there. But with the vessels that are actually in operation now, and keep in mind that this is a very young industry, it's sort of still in its development phase, but all of those vessels still need an operator. It's just not he or she's just not on the vessel. It just means they can sit comfortably in a chair on shore and operate the boat from there. So there's still that job, and now there's a lot more job because the boat is a lot more complex than it used to be. So you need somebody to actually program it. You need somebody to develop all the systems for it. So there's new jobs that get created just around being able to bring these things out there and have them up and running. And there's still servicing for the boats. I mean, they still need to go through maintenance and they still need servicing. And now that you have these autonomous boats, you have new types of boats that otherwise you wouldn't be using. There's a British company that just did a 4-week trip across the Atlantic doing surveying work, which I don't know if you would have sent out a boat like that with people to do surveying work for 4 weeks, and then somebody needed to monitor that. Somebody needed to get in the data. Somebody needed to when the boat came back, I reckon that somebody needed to go over it and ensure that the hull was okay and everything was fine. So there's still a lot of stuff you need to do. It's just different stuff. And you maybe take people out of the environment where they would be in danger and put them in a slightly more safe environment, but you still have stuff to do there.
I love that you just said that, because this is like a perfect example of during this time, people should be learning new skill sets, because as easy as it was where if someone went into a job and said, hey, can I work 3 days from home and then 2 days in the office? And the boss would say, no, absolutely not. And now everyone's working from home. And most of the big companies are saying, don't come back until 2021. It's the very quickly people are evolving to what's happening right now. And I think that you just ending this, just saying that, where yes, this is the way it was done, but all these new jobs can be created. This gives this gives anyone the opportunity to learn a new skill, so that way they're not obsolete. So I love that you just said that, and you did it so well in step by step by step. if you had a personal and a professional ask of anyone that's listening anywhere around this world, what would be your personal ask and what would be your professional ask of anyone?
Professional ask, if I start there, because if we learn anything from this podcast, I'm more inclined to talk about that than myself. So professional ask, I would say, if somebody's listening out there that might be interested in what we're doing with this sort of technology, where we're sitting, like, because we talked a lot here about autonomous vessels and stuff. We're not building autonomous vessels. We're not building a system for the autonomous vessels, but we're building capability for a vessel like that, which can also be capability for a manned vessel and has scalability into a lot of the maritime sectors. And there's somebody out there that is interested in that and interested in the future and capabilities of predicting difficult environments and helping improve safety and efficiency on these sort of boats, then I'd very much like to hear from them. On a more professional note, if anything, on a personal note, I'd say probably that if anybody is out there, maybe considering the question you asked before, considering moving into a startup environment or something like that, then I'd be happy to have a conversation. And that's one thing actually I think was worth mentioning about a good thing that's sort of come out of this crisis is meetings with people all over the place have been more readily available. Even though this technology was there before, now everybody just accepts it. So you just jump into a meeting much easier than you did before. Meetings aren't as prepared in that sense anymore. You don't need that long to set it up. You just instead of a Zoom interview or Zoom conversation, you talk to anybody anywhere. So which is good. So if anybody has something personal to talk about for startup about startup life or balancing difficulties with startup life or have any pointers on how I could do it better based on my description of what I'm doing, then I'd love to hear about it.
I mean, you're doing it extremely well. I always laugh because a startup in the States and the startups overseas are just so dramatically different because you're so into it and so far further advanced. And so I always say, like, small businesses overall is my big umbrella, small businesses, but you've been doing this for how many years now?
Hefring started that off in 2018. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, so.
But startup before that as well, but that wasn't mine.
But the thing is, like, you've been in this world for quite some time, and the conversations and the advice that you give out, you probably know so much more than you'd ever think about. But I do love the fact that you're opening up your world to anyone that wants to have a conversation. I want more people to understand what you're doing for the better of the ocean. There's so many individuals that take for granted what we see. We get our meals, we get our seafood. We get these things, and we don't assume, unless we see a big, huge showboat movie, we don't see or hear the negatives. And I love you and your team have come to the point where, like, we're going to solve a problem so that way we don't have to deal with having so many people that are losing their livelihood because of, we'll call it something that can't be fixed. So just having you here with a brand new technology to save the fishermen, to save the commercial industry, to save our oceans, I love it in so many ways because I'm an island kid. I love the ocean. I can't live without being by the ocean. I go to sleep by the ocean air. So it makes me so happy. So I wanted to come and talk to you.
That's good. I completely understand that. When I lived in Luxembourg, which is completely inland in continental Europe, I would always miss hearing and smelling the ocean. That's one thing that pulls Icelanders back home. It's like, you can't see the ocean, you gotta go home.
Yeah, I don't get it, but I mean, if you're born and raised inland, you've never seen it. I get it. I've always been at the ocean, so yeah, it would be very, very difficult for me. But Karl, thank you so very much for taking time out of your day. I really, 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 really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Because for me, I mean, I love not only catching up with people that I know, but also learning something. I mean, just like really understanding, because I knew about your technology, but I wasn't thinking about the individuals that were on the boats. And so that's just like another way of every single time I'm going out, going for my run, seeing how the fishermen are going out at 4 o'clock in the morning. Yes, I go for runs at 4 o'clock in the morning. But just to see them going out. I mean, they're going out and then by 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock, they're already in distributing. But I'm also watching, I'm more aware of watching them when they walk now and watching, they're just tired. And it's not just like, I'm tired because I got up. My body is tired. And I love that you're trying to solve that problem. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed this.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.